This is Luke Paulson, the Catholic Conservative, and welcome to the news of the week for November 15th, 2025. And if you enjoy these videos, do not forget to like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe for more. The redacted email. The Democrats released a whole slew of Epstein emails, conveniently when they need people to stop talking about the Schumer shutdown. The emails claim that Donald Trump was with a redacted victim of Epstein. However, the victim has since been named as none other than Virginia Giuffre. This is why the name was redacted. Miss Giuffre, who is no longer with us, under circumstances that are in no way suspicious, has stated publicly in sworn deposition and in her own book that Donald Trump was a gentleman. After all, if President Trump was listed as a client, the fake news would not have worried about all of these hoaxes. They would have gone straight for the jugular. President Trump has tried to release more documents, but two judges decided to block both attempts. The Democrats and the deep state are playing politics with these victims. That was a heavy topic that I was not supposed to talk about. So let us move on to a lighter subject that I am also not supposed to talk about. A Diwali Documentary. If you happen to be eating right now, I suggest that you pause this video and come back later. I will give you a moment. Okay, I guess all of those who are here are not eating anything right now. I have talked about or mentioned the pagan festival of Diwali and the poop throwing for almost a month now. The reason that I feel the need to mention it is that it celebrates demons. Now we see just how far the Overton window has shifted. YouTuber Tyler Oliveira supposedly canceled a documentary about Diwali after threats to his family and doxing. Who was threatening his family and doxing him? None other than the very people who would be on film in the documentary. I would think that the locals, as well as Hindus as a whole, are being mocked for throwing cow poop at one another. That is a very good thing to be mocked for. When he got home, Mr. Oliveira claimed to have spent $5,000 to get tested for various diseases. A good idea, considering he went into the cow poop as well. However, what we have here is a case of the Barbra Streisand effect. In not wanting to talk about it, more people are talking about it.
Ironic.
A link to the documentary will be in the description. Now let us move on from cow dung to the cows themselves. Certain drugs in our beef. We have long been injecting our livestock with drugs. Whether these drugs are needed or not has been hotly debated. Now cattle are being injected with mRNA vaccines. These drugs, which may or may not have dangerous side effects, are going into our food source. And for the vegetarians and vegans out there are even scientists trying to put these drugs into broccoli. I am glad that I live in a farming community, and thus know where every ounce of my food comes from. However, while these drugs are not mandatory to be put into our cattle, yet there may come a time when it is mandatory. We all know that the medical industrial complex lobbies to make their drugs mandatory, drugs for which there is no legal recourse should anything go wrong. Will this one day be mandatory for every food source?
Only Poppins would know.
I do not have a good transition. Let us move on to the election. Fulton ballot boxes. We all know that while the 2016 election was stolen, the 2020 election was the most secure election in the history of humanity. I am still waiting for evidence of either. Moving on, the Department of Justice has opened an investigation in Fulton County, Georgia. As you may recall, this is the county that was accused of pulling out boxes of ballots for Joe Biden after the counting was closed. Yes, technically the graph on screen is from Wisconsin, but I digress. Federal investigators have cited transparency concerns, thus yielding an investigation. Fulton County leaders have not only refused to hand over the documents, but insist that all documentation has already been given over. This will undoubtedly result in a lawsuit and potentially a subpoena. If everything that they did was above board, they should have nothing to hide. At least that is how the statist mind thinks. We will see what happens in this case. After all, elections have consequences, no matter who wins or loses. The shutdown is over. After all of this time, the government is poised to be open again. 8 Democrats came over and joined the Republicans in reopening the government. Among them was John Fetterman. I have mentioned a few times that his mind started to heal as soon as he embraced more Republican values.
Coincidence? I think not.
However, the Democrats did get a major concession in exchange for letting government workers get a paycheck. The Republicans have to have a debate on Obamacare subsidies. Remember that the only reason that inflation-inducing subsidies exist is that people would not pay for something otherwise. Now, while this is a small victory, because of this concession, some of the other threats fell apart. FAA shuts flights down. During the Schumer shutdown, the Federal Aviation Administration was going to shut down flights, because federal employees who worked in air traffic control had to take alternative jobs to pay their bills. Since not as many were in the towers, not as many planes could be in the air at a time. This all occurred because Democrats insisted on funding Medicare for illegals. However, the libertarian in me has to ask why this job needs to be done by the government at all. How about the planes get monitored by private contractors paid for by the airlines? That seems reasonable. We already know that the Transportation Security Administration has never caught a terrorist and has failed multiple audits, whereas private companies need to compete or lose their contracts. Privatization, as long as it does not lead to cronyism, has improved every industry from apple pickers to zipper makers. As such, let us briefly pivot to what happens with government monopolies, such as licensing requirements, taking their licenses away. I will not deny that English can be a difficult language. However, if you're going to read road signs, you need to be able to read English. Multiple drivers have crashed 18-wheelers after getting certified in California. These wrecks are being caused by illegals who cannot even read English. The Secretary of Transportation says that he may pull $160 million away from the state over this. There is also a possibility that all of the commercial driver's licenses issued to the illegals could be revoked as well under executive authority. One estimate says that this could affect 194,000 people and their families. However, since they are illegals, they chose to come here. As such, I have no sympathy whatsoever. Just learn the English language before legally entering the country, and then the problem will be solved. Now, going back to the political divide, there's now another battle going on. The conservative civil war. The conservative movement is in a bit of a civil war of ideas right now, just like when Donald Trump first came onto the scene. Today, most Republicans have decided to embrace the idea of America first. However, there are a few exceptions. We just call those people Republicans in name only. Now the divide is over support for Israel. People like Mark Levine, who have admitted to wanting to cancel people over not giving blind support to a foreign nation, are actually being adequately mocked in their own comment sections, while Marjorie Taylor Greene and others are being called traitors. However, since you cannot be a traitor to a foreign country, this is proof that the people on one side of the right are actually loyal to another country. Of course, the deep state wants to make this civil war as bad as possible. I would argue that this really escalated during a certain mostly peaceful protest, and the lies of Nancy Pelosi. The truth behind the protest: Nancy Pelosi is finally stepping down from office after decades of being on the public dime.
Hallelujah. 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 Hallelujah.
I will not say after years of being a public servant, because people like her only serve themselves. After all, she can get her hair done while the rest of us are locked down, and can use insider trading tips that would get the rest of us arrested. The investigation of the mostly peaceful protest of January 6th was entirely under Nancy Pelosi's jurisdiction. The Blaze has alleged that the person who placed the bomb was a U.S. Capitol Police officer named Shawnee Ray Kirkhoff. She then went to work for the Central Intelligence Agency. As soon as this name dropped, Nancy Pelosi stated that she would not seek re-election.
Coincidence? I think not!
Recall that the footage, which exonerated so many people at the Capitol, had to be released by Speaker Kevin McCarthy, because the Democrats just sat on the footage. As soon as the video was released by Tucker Carlson, he was fired from Fox News. The process is the punishment, and what the fake news meant for evil, God meant for good. In truth, there are a lot of people who need to be arrested, but most of them will not. It is up to the heavenly court to judge them. Not to mention the false witness of the BBC editors. Speaking of which, let us talk about them. The BBC deletes video. The BBC is an outlet of the fake news, specifically for the Brits. They decided to air the speech of President Trump prior to the mostly peaceful protest of January 6th, except they deleted more than 50 minutes of his speech. The edit made it sound like President Trump called for violence, not as a show of support for senators and representatives who are going to fix perceived flaws in the election. After President Trump learned about the edits, he immediately threatened to sue them for defamation to the tune of $1 billion. The BBC insists that this edit was a mistake. However, I have had a channel long enough to know that what they aired was not a mistake. That edit took a lot of time and energy. This was malicious reporting by the BBC. I suspect that the British government does not want the people to ever question them, as Americans question their government. One thing that neither the fake news in Britain or in America that you're not supposed to question is basic biological reality. Science makes a comeback. American passports must now list the person's biological sex. After all, it makes sense. This is a legal document, not a playground. As such, it is a place for scientific reality. I had better stop before this video gets flagged. However, the shift of the Overton window is also on an international scale. The International Olympic Committee has decided that athletes will compete based on biological reality. As a result of adolescence, males have denser bones, as well as larger hearts, lungs, and muscles as a whole. This gives a decided advantage in many sports. Have you ever wondered why no females transition to males so they can compete with males in more physical sports? That is because they know that they would lose. I love living in a time in which people follow the science. Overpopulation in Pokémon. When I first made this channel, I wanted it to be about fun things, like Pokémon. However, I saw the moral degradation of America as too great to stand idly by. But every so often, Pokémon is in the news. Now before you click away, this is important to the news cycle as a whole. Please just trust me. The newest game, Pokémon Legends ZA, picks up where Pokémon X and Y left off. Except now we know more about Team Flare. Previously, we just thought that it was a bunch of rich people who came together, while their leader Lysander wanted to eliminate everyone else to make the world a more beautiful place. Now we know that their goal was also population control. Rich people who want to limit the population to protect the environment from people? Now where have I seen that before?
Now the world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
Granted, this is back when he was still distributing the climate change Kool-Aid, but I digress. It is not just Bill Gates. There are plenty more people who want to control the planet's population for so-called benevolent ends. However, like Thanos and Lysander, they will not go first and lead by example. Who knew a game about capturing small creatures for fights could be so deep?
Maybe I'm just blowing smoke. Maybe I'm completely off my rocker, but that is just my opinion. And do not forget to like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe for more. But before you go, on the left I have last week's video, but you may also enjoy the video on the right.